Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Western Canon Challenge, where we are reading the entirety of the Western literary canon out loud. Today we are continuing in Book 4 of The Well at the World's End. We are on Chapter 26, this entitled Ralph Sees His Father and Mother Again. And with that said, I'll get started. Thus came they into the marketplace of Woolstead, nigh to Clement's house, and there the company stood in ordered ranks. Ralph looked round about, half expecting to see his gossip standing in the door, but Clement smiled and said, "Thou art looking round for thy gossip, fair sir, but she is upon the north gate in war gear, for we be too few in Woolstead to spare so clean-limbed and strong-armed a dame from our muster. But she shall be here again, thou comest back from the Austin Canons, whither forsooth thou mayest go at once if thou wilt be master in the matter of lodging." Said Ralph, smiling, "Well, Ring of Woolstead, since thou givest leave, I will intake it. Nor needest thou give me any guide to the house of St. Austin, for I know it well. Sweetheart," said he, turning to Ursula, "what sayest thou? Wilt thou come with me, or abide till tomorrow, when I shall show thee to my kinsman?" "Nay," she said, "I will with thee at once, my lord, if thou wilt be kind and take me. For meseemeth I have also a word to say to thy father and the mother that bore thee." "And thou, Hugh," said Ralph, "what sayest thou?" "Why, brother," said Hugh, "I think my blessing will abide the morrow's morn, for I have naught so fair and dear to show our father and mother as thou hast. Also tomorrow thou wilt have more to do, since thou art a captain, and I but a single varlet." And he smiled a little sourly on Ralph, who heeded it little, but took Ursula's hand and went his way with her. It was but a few minutes for them to come to the house of the Canons, which was well walled toward the fields at the west of the town, so that it was its chief defense of that side. It was a fair house with a church but just finished, and Ralph could see down the street its new white pinnacles and the cross on its eastern gable rising over the ridge of the dortoir. They came to the gate, and round about it were standing men-at-arms, not a few, who seemed doughty enough at first sight. But when Ralph looked on them, he knew some of them, that they were old men and somewhat past warlike deeds, for in sooth they were carles of Upmeads. Him they knew not, for he had somewhat cast down the visor of his helm, but they looked eagerly on the fair lady and the goodly knight. So Ralph spake to the porter, and bade him show him where was King Peter of Upmeads and his lady wife. And the porter made him obeisance, and told him that they were in the church, wherein was service toward, and bade him enter. So they went in and entered into the church, and it was somewhat dim, because the sun was set, and there were many pictures and knots of flowers in the glass of the windows. So they went halfway down the nave, and stood together there, and the whole church was full of the music that the minstrels were making in the rood loft, and most heavenly sweet it was. And as Ralph stood there, his heart heaved with hope and love and sweetness of his youth, and he looked at Ursula, and she hung her head, and he saw that her shoulders were shaken with sobs. But he knew that it was with her as with him, so he spake no word to her. Now when his eyes cleared, and he was used to the twilight of the church, he looked toward the choir, and saw near to the Jesus altar a man and a woman standing together, even as they were standing, and they were somewhat stricken in years. Presently he knew that this would be his father and mother. So he stood still and waited till the service should be over. And when it was done, the twilight was growing fast in the church, and the sacristan was lighting a lamp here and there in some of the chapels and the aisles of the choir. So King Peter and his wife turned and came slowly down the nave, and when they were come anigh, Ralph spake aloud and said, "Hail, King Peter of Upmeads!" And the old man stopped and said unto him, "Yea, forsooth, my name is Peter, and my business is to be a king, or a kinglet rather, and once it seemed no such hard craft, but now it all goes otherwise, and belike my craft has left me, even as it fares with a leech when folk are either too well or too ill to need his leechcraft." Then he looked at Ralph and at Ursula and said, "Either my eyes are worse than I deemed yesterday, or thou art young and a gallant knight, and she that is standing by thee is young and fair. Ah, lad, time was when I have bid thee come home, thou and thy sweetling, to my house with me, and abide there in ease and feastfully. But now the best rede I can give thee is to get thee gone from the land, for there is all unpeace in it. And yet, forsooth, friend, I know not where to send thee to seek for peace, since Upmeads hath failed us. While he spoke, and Ralph was sore moved by the sound of his voice, and his speech wherein kindness and mocking was so blended, the dame of Upmeads came to Ralph, and laid her hand on his arm. And she said in a pleasant voice, for she was soft-hearted and soft-spoken both, Will not the fair young warrior and his mate do so much for an old man and his wife, who have heard not tidings of their best beloved son for 2 years, well nigh, as to come with them to their chamber and answer a little question or two, as to the parts of the world they have seen of late? Ralph nodded yeasay, and began to move towards the porch, the Dame of Upmeads sticking close to him all the time, and King Peter following after and saying, Yea, young man, thou mayest think the worse of me for hanging about here amongst the monks, when and now for all I know the battle is pitched in Upmeads. But Nicholas and all of them would have it so. Yea, and all my sons are away, fair sir, though of the eldest, who meseems was born with a long head, we hear that he is thriving and hath grown great. As he spake, they were come into the porch, and passed into the open air where it was still light. Then the dame turned round on Ralph, and caught him by the 2 arms, and cried out and cast her arms about his neck. And when she could sunder herself a little from him, she said, O Ralph, I deemed that I knew thy voice, but I durst not house thee, till I knew it was mine own flesh and blood, lest I would have died for grief to think it was thee when it was not. O son, how fair thou art! Now do off thy sally, that I may see thee, thy face and thy curly head. So did he, smiling as one who loved her, and again she fell to kissing and clipping him. Then his father came up and thrust her aside gently, and embraced him also, and said, Tell me, son, what thou art become. Thou art grown much of a man since thou stolest thyself away from me. Is there aught behind this goodly raiment of thine? And this fair lady, hath she stolen thee away from thy foes to bring thee home to us? Ralph laughed and said, No less than that, father, I will tell thee all presently. But this first, that I am the captain of a goodly company of men-at-arms, and— Ah, son, sweetheart, said his mother, and thou wilt be going away from us again to seek more fame. And yet, as I look on thee, thou seemest to have grown great enough already. I deem thou wilt not leave us. Mother, my dear, said Ralph, tomorrow morn we shall go down to battle in Upmeads, and the day after I shall come hither again, and bring you back to the high house, with all honor and glory. But look, mother, and he took Ursula's hand, here is a daughter, and a darling that I have brought back to thee, for this is my wedded wife. Then Ursula looked beseechingly at the dame, who took her in her arms and clipped her and kissed her, and she said, Welcome, daughter, for I feel in thy body that thou lovest me. Then said King Peter, Forsooth, son, she is a sweet and dainty creature. If there be a fairer than her, I wot not. But none so fair have I mine eyes looked on. Tell me whose daughter she is, and of what lineage. And therewith he took her hand and kissed her. But Ursula said, I come from no earl or baron. I am a yeoman's daughter, and both my father and my mother are dead. I have no nigh kin, save one brother who loveth me not, and would heed it little if he never saw my face again. Now I tell thee this, that if my lord biddeth me go from him, I will depart, but for the bidding of none else will I leave him. King Peter laughed and said, Never will I bid thee depart. Then he took her hand and said, Sweetling, fair daughter, what is thy name? Ursula, she said. Said he, Ursula, thy palms are harder than be the hands of the dainty dames of the cities. But there is no churl's blood in these meseemeth. What is thy kindred of the yeoman? She said, We be come of the Garings of old time. It may be that the spear is broken, and the banner torn, that we forget not our forefathers, though we labor afield, and the barons and the earls call us churls, and it is told amongst us that the word is but another way of saying earl, and that it meaneth a man. Then spoke Ralph, Father and mother both, I may well thank thee and bless thee that your eyes look upon this half of me with kind eyes. And now I shall tell thee that for this woman, her heart is greater than a king's or a leader of folk, and meseemeth her palms have hardened with the labor of delivering me from many troubles. Then the Dame of Upmeads put her arms about Ursula's neck again, and bade her all welcome once more, with sweet words of darling and dear and well-beloved daughter. But King Peter said, Son, thou hast not told me what thou art become, and true it is that thou hast the look of a great one. Said Ralph, Father and King, I have become the lord of the little land of abundance, the sworn brother of the champions of the Dry Tree, and the lord of the castle of the Scar, the brother and war-duke of the shepherds. And tomorrow shall I be the conqueror of the robbers and the devils of the burg. And this be not enough for me. Hearken. I and my wife both, yea, and she leading me, have drunk of the well at the world's end, and have become friends thereof. And he looked at his father with looks of love, and his father drew nigh to him again, and embraced him once more, and stroked his cheeks, and kissed him as if he had become a child again. O son, said he, whatsoever thou dost, thou hast done full well. And lo, one while when I look on thee, thou art my dear and sweet child, as thou wert years agone, and I love thee dearly and finely. And another while thou art great and mighty man, and I fear thee. So much greater thou seemest than we poor upland folk. Then smiled Ralph for love and happiness, and he said, Father, I am thy child in the house and at the board, and that is for thine helping. And I am thy champion, and the fierce warrior afield, and that also is for thine helping. Be of good cheer, for thine house shall not wane, but wax. And all those four were full of joy, and their hearts were raised aloft. But as they spake, thus came a lay brother, and bent the knee before King Peter, and bade him and the Dame of Upmeads to supper in the name of the prior, and the captain and the lady therewith. For indeed the rumour of the coming of a host for the helping of the countryside had gotten into that house, and the prior and the brethren sorely desired to look upon the captain, not knowing him for Ralph of Upmeads. So into the hall they went together, and there the holy fathers made them great feast and joy, and King Peter might not refrain him, but told the prior how this was his son come back from the far lands, with a goodly lady he had won to wife therein. And the prior and all the fathers made much of Ralph, and rejoiced in their hearts when they saw how goodly a man of war he had gotten to be. And the prior would lead him on to tell him of the marvels he had seen in the far parts of the world, but Ralph said but little thereon, whereas his thought was set on the days that lay even before his feet. Yet some deal he told him of the uncouth manners of the lands beyond Whitwall, and at last he said, Father, when the battles be over here, and there is peace in our lands again, I will ask thee to give me guesting for a night, that I may tell thee all the tale of what hath befallen me since the last summer day when I rode through Wulstead. But now I ask leave of thee to depart, for I have many things to do this even, as behoveth a captain, before I sleep an hour or two. And if it be thy will, I would leave the lady my wife with my mother here, at least till morrow morn. So the prior gave him leave, low though he were, and Ralph kissed his father and mother, and they blessed him. But Ursula said to him softly, It is my meaning to go with thee down to Upmeads tomorrow, for who knoweth what may befall thee? Then he smiled upon her, and went his ways down the hall and out of gates, while all men looked on him and did him worship. Chapter 27. Ralph holds converse with Catherine his gossip. Ralph went straight from St. Austin's to Clement's house, and found much people about the door thereof, what of the townsmen, and what of the men of his host. He passed through these, and found Clement in his chamber, and with him a half-score of such company as was without, and amongst them Roger and the sage. But Stephen and Richard were both amongst their men doing what was needful. All men arose when Ralph entered, but he looked around and could see naught of his gossip amongst them. Then he sat down by Clement, and asked if he had any fresh tidings. And Clement did him to wit that there had come in a carle from out of Upmeads, who had told them by sure tokens that the foe were come into the Upmeads land at noon that day, and that between then and sunset had skirmished with Nicholas, and them that were holding the high house, but had gotten not thereby. This man, said Clement, being both bold and of good slate, had mingled with the foe, and had heard the talk of them. He said that they had no inkling of the shepherds, or of the Dry Tree coming against them, But they looked to have aid from their own folk from the lands of Higham, wherefore they made a mock of the defence of the Upmeads men, and said that since, when they were all joined together in Upmeads, they might enter where they would without a loss of a half-score men. Therefore they would risk not now, nor would they burn either the high house or the other steadings, since, said they were minded to keep them sound and whole for their own. These tidings seemed good to Ralph, so he took a cup of wine and pledged the company, and said, My masters, such of you as list to sleep long tonight, had best be abed presently, for I warn you that the trumpets will blow for departure before the sun riseth tomorrow. And he that faileth to see tomorrow's battle will be sorry for his lack all his life long. And when he had thus spoken, they all cried hail to him, and anon arose and went their ways. Then Ralph bade Clement come with him, that he might visit the quarters of his men-at-arms, and see that all the leaders knew of their muster, and of the order of departing on the morrow. So Clement arose and went with him. And as they were on the way, Ralph asked Clement what ailed his gossip Catherine, that she had not come to meet him already. And Clement laughed and said, Not, she is somewhat shamefaced to meet thee first amongst a many folk, and she not able belike to refrain her kisses and caresses to thee. Fear not, she is in her bower aloft, and we shall find her there when we come back from our errand. Fear not, she will not sleep till she hath had her arms about thee. Good is that, said Ralph. I had looked to see her ere now, but when we meet apart from folk, something we shall be able to say to each other, which belike neither she nor I had like to leave unsaid till we meet again. So came they to the chief quarters of the fighting men, and Ralph had all the leaders called to him, and he spake to them of how they should do on the morrow, both footmen and horsemen, what wise they should stand together, and how they should fall on. And he told them as clearly as if he were already in the field with the foe before him, so that they wondered at him, so young in years, being so old in the wisdom of war. Withal they saw of him that he had no doubt but that they should come to their above on the morrow. And all men, not only of the tried men-at-arms of the Dry Tree, but they of the shepherds also, even those of them who had never stricken a stroke in anger, were of high heart, and feared not what should befall. So when all this business was over, they turned about and came their ways home to Clement's house again. They saw lights in the chamber, or even they entered, and when they came to the door, lo, there within was Catherine, walking up and down the floor as if she knew not how to contain herself. She turned and saw Ralph at the door, and she cried aloud and ran towards him with arms outspread. But when she drew nigh to him and beheld him closely, she withheld her, and falling down on her knees before him, took his hand and fell to kissing it, and weeping and crying out, "O my Lord, thou art come again to us." But Ralph stooped down to her, and lifted her up, and embraced her, and kissed her on the cheeks and the mouth, and led her to the settle, and sat down beside her, and put his arms about her. And Clement looked on smiling, and sat him down over against them. Then spake Catherine, "O my lord, how great and masterful hast thou grown! Never did I hope to see thee come back so mighty a man." And again she wept for joy. But Ralph kissed her again, and she said, laughing through her tears, "Master Clement, this lord and warrior hath brought back with him something that I have not seen, and belike he hath had one fair woman in his arms, or more it may be since I saw him last. For though he but kisses me as his gossip and foster mother, yet are his kisses closer and kinder than they were aforetime." Said Clement, "Sooth is a sage's guess, yet verily, fair sir, I have told her somewhat of thy journeys, so far as I knew of them." Said Catherine, "Dear lord and gossip, wilt thou not tell me more thereof now?" "What?" said Ralph, "shall I not sleep tonight?" "Dear gossip," she said, "thou art overmighty to need sleep. And I had forgotten in the joy of our meeting that tomorrow thou shalt go to battle, and how it shall not come again." "Fear not," said Ralph. "Art thou not somewhat foreseeing? Dost thou not know that tomorrow or the day after I shall come back unhurt and victorious? And then shall both thou and Clement come to Upmeads, and abide there as long as ye will. And then shall I tell thee many tales of my wanderings, and Ursula, my beloved, she also shall tell thee." Catherine reddened somewhat, but she said, "Would I might kiss her feet, dear lord. But now I pray thee, tell me somewhat, now at once." "So shall it be," said Ralph, "since thou wilt have it, dear gossip. But when I have done, I shall ask thee to tell me somewhat, whereof hath long been wonder in my mind. And meseemeth that by the time we are both done with tales, I shall needs be putting on my helm again. Nay, again I tell thee, it is but a show of battle that I go to. So then he went and sat by Clement's side, and began and told over as shortly as might be the tidings of his journeys, and oft she wept for pity thereat. But when he was done, and had sat beholding her, and saw how goodly a woman she was, and how straight and well knit of body, he said, Gossip, I wonder now if thou hast drunk of the well, for thou art too fair and goodly to be of the age that we call thee. How is this? Also, tell me how thou camest by this pair of beads that seem to have led me to the well at the world's end. For as I said and now, I have long marvelled how thou hadst had them and where. Fair sir, said Clement, as for her drinking of the well at the world's end, it is not so. But this is a good woman, and valiant, and of great wisdom. And such women wear well, even as a well-wrought piece of armour that hath borne many strokes of the craftsman's hand, and hath in it some deal of this very mind and wisdom of him. But now let her tell thee her tale, which forsooth I know not, for night is growing old. Chapter 28. Dame Catherine tells of the pair of beads, and whence she had them. Catherine cast friendly looks on them, and said, Gossip, and thou Clement, I will make a clean breast of it once for all. In the days when I first wedded Master Clement yonder, he found his bed cold without me, for he was a hot lover. Therefore would he have often me with him on his journeys, how hard soever or perilous the way might be. Yea, Clement, thou lookest sooth, though thou sayest it not. I was not low thereto, partly because I would not grieve thee, my man, but partly, and belike mostly, because I was wishful to see the ways of the world, even at the risk of being thrust out of the world. So it befell us on a time to make a journey together, a journey exceeding long, in the company of certain chapmen, whereof some, and not a few, died on the way. But we lived, and came into the eastern parts of the earth to a city right ancient, and fulfilled of marvels which hight Sarras the Holy. There we saw wonders, whereof it were overlong to tell of here, but one while I will tell thee, my lord. But this I must needs say, that I heard tell of a woman dwelling there, who was not old by seeming, but had in her wisdom of 10 lives. And the longing gat hold of me to see her and learn wisdom of her. So I entreated many who were called wise, some with prayers and some with gifts also, to help me to speech of her. But I gat nothing, either by praying or giving. They that would have helped me could not, and they that could would not. So what between one thing and another, the longing to see the wise woman grew as it were into a madness in me, amidst of which we fell in with a merchant exceeding wise in ancient lore, who looked at me, though Clement knew it not, with eyes of love. Of this man I asked concerning the wise woman, and he, seeing my desire, strove to use it merchant-like, and would deal with me, and have in payment for his learning a gift which I had naught to do to give. Howbeit madness and my desire for speech with the wise woman got the better of me, and I promised to give no less than he would, trusting to beguile him after I had got my desire, and be quit of him. So he led me to the woman, and went his ways. She dwelt all by herself in a nook of an ancient ruined palace, erst the house of the ancientest of all kings of Sarras. When I came to her, I saw naught dreadful or ugsome about her. She was cheerful of countenance and courteous of demeanour, and greeted me kindly as one neighbour in the street of Woolstead might do to another. I saw her that she was by seeming a woman of some 40 winters, trim and well-fashioned of body, nowise big, but slender, of dark red hair, and brown eyes somewhat small. Now she said to me, I have looked for thee a while. Now thou art come, thou shalt tell me what thou needest, and thy needs will I fulfill. Yet needs must thou do a thing for me in return, and maybe thou wilt deem it a great thing. Yet whereas thou hast struck a bargain before thou camest hither, if I undo that for thee, the bargain with me may be not so burdensome. How sayest thou? Well, I saw now that I was in a trap, for ill it had been in those days had Clement come to know that I had done amiss, for he was a jealous lover and a violent man. Clement smiled hereat, but said naught, and Catherine went on. Trap or no trap, if I were eager before, I was over-eager now, so when she bade me swear to do her will, I swore it without tarrying. Then she said, Sit down before me, and I will teach thee wisdom. What did she teach me? Say ye. Well, if I told ye belike, ye would be none the wiser. But so much she told me, that my heart swelled with joy of the wisdom which I garnered. Say thou, Clement, if I had been the worser woman to thee, or thy friends or mine. Nay, good wife, said Clement, I have naught against thee. Catherine laughed and went on. At last the wise woman said, Now that thou hast of me all that may avail thee, comes the other part of our bargain, wherein I shall take, and thou shalt give. Quoth I, That is but fair, and thou shalt find me true to thee. She said, If thou be not, I shall know it, and shall amend it in such wise that it shall cost thee much. Then she looked on me long and keenly, and said afterward, Forsooth I should forbear laying this charge upon thee, if I did not deem that thou wouldest be no less than true. But now I will try it, whereas I deem that the days of my life henceforward shall not be many. And many days would it take me to find a woman as little foolish as thee, and as little false, and thereto as fairly fashioned. Therewith she put her hand to her neck, and took thence the selfsame pair of beads which I gave to thee, dear gossip, and which, praise be to All Hallows, thou hast borne ever since. And she said, Now hearken, thou shalt take this pair of beads, and do with them as I bid thee. Swear again thereto. So I swore by all angels, and she at the world's end. But no woman. Forsooth, if a woman have them of a woman, or the like of them, for there be others, they may serve her for a token, but will be no talisman or leading stone to her. And this I tell thee, thou seekest to the well on the strength of them, for I bid thee give them to a man that thou lovest well, when he is in most need. Only he shall not be of thine own blood. This is all that I lay upon thee, and if thou do it, thou shalt thrive, and if thou do it not, thou shalt come to harm. And I will tell thee now that this meeting betwixt us is not by chance hap, but of my bringing about. For I have labored to draw thee to me, knowing that thou alone of women would avail me herein. Now shalt thou go home to thine hostel, and take this for a token of my soothsaying. The wise merchant who led thee unto me is abiding thy homecoming, that he may have of thee that which thou promised to him. If then thou findest him at the hostel, and he take thee by the hand and lead thee to bed, whereas Clement is away till tomorrow even, then thou shalt call me a vain word-spinner and a liar. But if when thou comest home, there the folks say to thee Merchant Valerius is ridden away hastily, being called afar on a message of life and death, then shalt thou trow in me as a wise woman. Herewith depart, and I bid thee farewell. So I went my ways to my hostel, trembling, and at the door I met the chamberlain, who said to me, Lady, the merchant Valerius hath been here seeking thee, and he hath said he would abide thy coming. But amidst of his abiding cometh a man who would speak to him privily, whereof it came that he called for his horse, and bade me tell thee, lady, that he was summoned on a matter of life and death, and would return to kiss thine hands in 5 days' space. So I wotted that the woman had spoken sooth, and was wise in foreseeing, and something of a dread of her came upon me. But the next even back cometh Clement, and the day after we rode away from Sarras the Holy, and Valerius I saw never again. And as to the beads, there is naught to tell of them till they came into thine hands. And something tells me that it was the will of the wise woman that to no other hands they should come. Here Catherine made an end, and both the men sat pondering her little tale. As for Ralph, he deemed it certain that the wise woman of Sarras would be none other than she who had taught lore to the Lady of Abundance. But why should she have meant the beads for him he wotted not. Again he wondered how it was that the Lady of Abundance would have given the beads to Ursula, and whether she knew that they had no might to lead her to the well at the world's end. And yet further he wondered how it was that Ursula, unholpen by the talisman, should have done so much to bring him to the well. Yea, and how she was the first to see it while he slept. But his heart told him that whereas he was seeking the well with her, she must needs come hither with him, unless they were both cast away. Withal Catherine looked at him and said, Yea, dear lord, I wot that thou art thinking of. But couldst thou have left her, when thou hadst once found her again, well or no well? Sooth is that, said Ralph. Yet for all that she hath done without help of talisman or witchcraft, is she more worshipful and the dearer. Then speech came into Clement's mouth, and he said, Wife, it is as I said before, when thy gossip hath just departed from us. It was meet enough that thou shouldst have loved him better than me. But now it is even less to be undone than ever, when he has come back bringing with him a woman so valiant and lovely as is my Lady Ursula. So thou must intake the life that the fate hath sent thee. Catherine laughed through her tears, and said, Withal, goodman, I have been no bad wife to thee. And moreover, look thou, gossip dear, when I was wandering about with Clement amongst many perils, when our need seemed sorest, then would I think give the beads to Clement. But soon as I began to speak to him of the well at the world's end, he would belittle the tale of it, and would bid me look to it if it were not so, that where the world endeth the clouds begin. As she spoke, Ralph lifted up his hand and pointed to the window and said, Friends, as we were speaking of all these marvels, we were forgetting the needs of Upmeads and the day of battle. And lo now, how the dawn is widening and the candles fading. Scarce were the words out of his mouth, when on the quietness of the beginning of day brake out the sound of 4 trumpets, which were sounding in the 4 quarters of town and blowing men to the gathering. Then rose up both Ralph and Clement, and took their weapons, and they kissed Catherine and went soberly out of doors into the market-place, where already weaponed men were streaming into the muster. This is the end of chapters 26 through 28 of The Well at the World's End, a tale by William Morris. In the next video, which will be our last, we will start with chapter 29, entitled, They Go Down to Battle in Upmeads. Thank you for listening.